Hi, guys. Good morning, and welcome to the Vero Advisors live stream where we come to you with all of the latest and greatest in digital transformation, particularly in the public sector. But today I am super excited to host Miss Kyler Cheatham, who has been a leader in the tech industry, particularly in women in tech. And Kyler, you've been such a great mentor to me in helping me find my voice in the tech space. And I'm just so excited to have you today. So good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me and back at you. I'm super excited to be able to collaborate on this conversation. It's kind of new to our industry and very much kind of your wheelhouse. So I'm pumped to learn from you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Kyler. If you guys don't know Kyler, you need to get to know her and go out and follow her on all of her platforms. She puts out a lot of great content, like I said, in particularly with the women in tech space and all things digital transformation. And she also makes it fun and realistic. So make sure you go out and follow her. If you're joining us for the first time today, we do have some content for you to scan up in the left-hand corner. It's our 2025 Government Digital Transformation Report. So make sure you go out and download that on all the latest and greatest insights from our perspective and what we're hearing in the market. And really quick, if you don't know who Avero Advisors is, Avero Advisors is a third party independent consulting firm. We specialize in AI consulting, which we'll get to in a little bit, and ERP consulting, as well as business process reengineering and IT strategic planning, specifically for the public sector. So, Kyler, big topic today,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Stargate, a
Mhm.
huge AI initiative, huge,
Mhm.
that Donald Trump put or signed off on last week, I think it was. And so it's
Mhm.
made a lot of noise in the market. And I want to dive into, what is it, right? What does it
Mhm.
mean? And
Mhm.
how our constituents can prepare for something so big and so life changing. So, before we do that, I do want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and tell our viewers just about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
For sure, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I'm Kyler Cheatham. I am in the digital transformation, digital strategy space. Specifically, my focus a lot of times is in heavy manufacturing or how in complex environments can we integrate technologies into making sure that we have effective outputs. So that's just a really
Mhm,
fancy way of saying how do you make sure things like AI is actually giving you good and healthy business results. So that's
mhm.
kind of what I talk about in the industry. And I'm super pumped for this conversation specifically today because this is kind of a newer innovation around one of the biggest entities in the entire world, which is the US government, looking at a really sound AI strategy. So that's something
Mhm.
that can be scaled to not only local governments, which you support, municipalities, but also for the private sector businesses to kind of look
True.
at what does this mean as far as partnerships, investments, all of those different things. So I'm super excited for to have this conversation with you, and of course hear from the audience, because this is really still a lot of unknowns in this
Mhm.
conversation. So it's great to have our networks kind of chime in on things that they might know or thoughts they might have, because the point of these conversations is to get that diversity of opinions.
Yes, absolutely. And I second that. So if you are joining us today, please let us know by typing a message in the chat box and ask us your questions. Like Kyler said, this is a collaboration, a collaborative space where we can all come together and share our opinions. So we'd love to hear from you and hear your questions. So let's dive in. So
Mhm.
let's do a high level overview to start out with. So Stargate, what is it? It was announced on January the 21st, and it is a $100 billion project with the option to expand to 500 billion with a B over the next 4 years. There are some major tech players in the market that are backing this. We're talking OpenAI, Oracle, SoftBank, and MGX as well. And really, the ultimate goal is that it's aimed at securing U.S. leadership in AI and boosting competitiveness over China. So, Kyler, when you first heard about this
Mhm,
initiative, what were your thoughts? I was a little blown away. I have a lot of questions, but
mhm.
what were your initial thoughts
Well, I
when this
think
was announced?
yeah, I think, you and I are always on the same wavelength as, technology implementation specialists. We want to know like the what, the how, the when. We
Yeah,
want that timeline right now. And we kind of have to back up and look at, this is a huge step for specifically the US government, which is just, we are a capitalist society. So a lot of times the private sector and public sector don't always partner up. They can be kind of
right.
siloed, and I think that that's a great kind of model to just see that these groups are coming together to create a strategy to benefit the overall population of the United States. And then also to trickle down that leadership to local governments as well. So I think if nothing else, that really showcases like, hey, let's all get the right people in the room and start to talk about an AI strategy. I think one thing that the unknowns really do is create kind of this assumptions, right? In local government. I know you recently did like an amazing video on how to actually talk to your constituents about AI. But that's
Yeah.
the one thing that I think they really need to define is like, what is AI? And that's what
Hmm.
organizations really need to define for themselves. Is it automating your supply chain so that you have some sort of predictive maintenance? Is it,
Hmm.
looking at your school district and ensuring that you have bite-sized learning modules? What does AI mean? And that's why we have so much competition in the marketplace, because there's all of these really niche options. But I think my first reaction, and I'm curious to hear yours, was good for them to start this conversation and bring
Hmm.
in the experts that really understand not only the functionality, but the implementation needs for this type of kind of federal initiative.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's a great thought. And I think my initial reaction was pure excitement because I'm with you. I think it's great that someone put a plan together and said, hey, this is how we're going to try to build this thing out, right?
Mhm.
But the other piece of me was a little bit terrified,
Yeah.
just in particularly in how it's going to impact my clients, right? And dealing in the local government space, we deal with a lot of older infrastructure, right, and older processes, and so in terms of AI readiness, they're not ready,
Mm.
and so how do they make this huge jump to now get ready to utilize this big initiative? And so let's talk a little bit about um, what are the key features, right? So the infrastructure development is a big piece to this initiative, and what that means is that massive data centers are going
Uh-huh.
to be peppered, throughout the United States, and one is already being built or has been built, right, in Abilene, Texas.
Mhm.
And so, what does that mean for our local communities and cities and counties in which these data centers are going to be built?
Yeah.
What does it mean for them? Right.
Yeah.
And that's the first thought I had,
Yeah.
because I was like, okay, a data center. Number one, what does that mean? What types of data are going to be housed there, and who's going to manage this data? Like who's working in these centers?
Yeah.
So anyway, I want to talk about that
Yeah.
because that is the biggest key feature to all of this. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, amen. I mean, that is such an important conversation. And I think you really hit the nail on the head of really defining and unpacking what is artificial intelligence. I
Yep.
think the cloud infrastructure of artificial intelligence, my friend Brad Feeks puts it perfectly in the fact that using the cloud is just using someone else's computer. So it's
Hmm.
not kind of just living in this untangible universe, especially for government data, right? it's living in actual data centers. And there's still a lot of compliance around where that is. So just because your data is not in house or on premise, as we call it a lot of times, the data centers in which your cloud hosting platforms are utilizing, that's where your data is being stored. And if you've ever been in one of these, it's like going into Fort Knox. Like you go through the metal detectors, there's armed guards, you surrender that, you sign in blood. They're very high security. So that's one thing that I think is so important to understand is there is
Yeah.
a physical location for cloud platforms that are
Mhm.
used in data centers. And I first think that it's great that we're using data centers or building data centers in the United States to have access to that from that standpoint, as opposed to offshore data centers, which we utilize
Mhm.
a lot. So, for local governments being able to kind of manage that, that opens up job opportunities in construction, in architecture, in maintenance. I think Avalon, and correct me, or Abilene, correct me if I'm wrong. I
Yes.
think it's like um, 180,000 jobs or something that
Wow.
is coming into that infrastructure. So
Mhm.
that's a huge piece of it. I think the physical piece will be the easy part, as you mentioned, for the readiness, the
Yep.
figuring out your data strategy, which is really the foundation of an AI strategy, is going to be the challenge for these governments or these local governments, even the
Mhm.
private sector. We have a
Right.
lot of that in as
Mhm.
challenges. And that's why you really need someone to come in, take a look at your data, and give you a strategy of like how you're going to cleanse it, how you're going to automate it. Because when you do a lift and shift strategy, which we say in the industry, even if you lift and shift broken processes, unhealthy data, that's going to be, garbage output in your new system. It doesn't
It's not gonna
matter
work.
what that means. So that's going to be the biggest piece of that. And I'm curious, what your thoughts are on that, and knowing that you really are the top readiness expert when it comes to the public sector, because that's a piece that, we really have to figure out immediately. And
Mhm.
it doesn't need to be a huge implementation project for you to get that foundations into place.
Right, right, and I couldn't agree more, and my thought is that the data, the cleanliness of your data is the base of any AI project, right? I mean, we're looking at AI, utilizing AI internally here at Avero, and
Right.
the reality of it is our data has to be a little bit more clean to be able to use the AI platforms that we want to use for certain processes. And so I think it really does. I agree with you, Kyler. I think it starts there. If you don't know, where your data lives, that's your first
Mhm.
issue. And if you don't, if your data isn't clean, it's like you said, if we lift and shift all of that into an AI platform, it's not going to work for you like you think. And you can't just, I say this all the time, you can't just plug in a new technology, whether it be
Mhm.
AI, a new piece of software, whatever it is, there's planning that needs to go into it. Because if you lift everything and do everything the same way you've been doing for years into a new system, it's not going to automate or be as efficient as you need it to be. So yes, that is what we are talking to our clients about
Mhm.
right now. Is we're coming in and we're asking, certain questions around AI readiness, and all of them have to do with where's your data and how clean is it, and do we need to clean it up?
Mhm.
Can we organize it a little bit better? So we will be announcing later to come in February. We're going to be announcing our AI readiness assessment offering that we will be just small plug.
Yeah,
But no,
always.
I couldn't agree more. I could not
Yeah.
agree more.
Yeah.
I'm still excited about how it's going to change the entire economy, not
Mhm.
just in Texas, not just in places where these data centers are housed, but it's going to change. I mean, think about healthcare and national security. I think one of the podcasts I listened to, they were talking about how these data centers and the computing that goes into finding cures for cancer and
Oh, yeah.
personalized wellness plans. Like, that's crazy to me. And my first thought around that piece is, um, are there people in healthcare that really understand what that could mean for them and for their industry? Same thing with local government. Like, are there
Absolutely.
those experts that can understand this data and how it could work for them? And I guess um, fast pace their processes, right?
Mhm.
Like, are there those experts in these fields that understand it? And is that knowledge there? What do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think to a point, and that's the cool part about AI, just to kind of piggyback off of your plug for readiness, is are if you don't know what you're doing, if you're like, okay, I
Hmm.
know that we need to get on this wavelength, but I have no idea like how to get there, that's totally
Hmm.
normal. Go through these processes, invest in a readiness assessment. You can absolutely do your own project after that, anything. But you
Yeah.
at least need to know what your current state is. And I think that's a big piece to this puzzle. And for AI, the cool part is we don't need to do a massive, say, ERP,
Mm-mm.
HCM overhaul, right? We just need to look at a business unit and create a proof of concept. So you mentioned healthcare. Say they
Mhm,
did this with the Food and Drug Administration, right? And
mhm,
focused on kind of automating these ingredients, making sure that whatever kind of policies they had around drug distribution, having that as far as AI mining these opportunities to look at where processes may be broken within federal food and drug distribution. That's one area of the business or the government, right, of the
mhm,
organization in which you can implement AI, utilize that as a proof of concept to then scale throughout the rest of your organization. Because a lot of times when we're looking at AI, we see niche systems that need to be integrated into one clean core, whether that's,
mhm,
your ERP system, whether that's a best of breed stack. We need to just make sure that that is all working together. And now we've gone from these big monolithic systems, right, to a more niche systems that actually give you what you need. So it's almost become as unique as, a person's DNA is
right,
their technology within an organization. And that's why it's so critical to have someone on your side like a Vero, because they're dedicated to your goals, not what AI,
right,
the vendor or your ERP vendor wants you to buy. I'm sure
mhm,
Tyler Tech wants you to buy a certain AI that they have invested in, that they want to implement in your organization. So going straight to your vendor is going to be a risk for you because you might
mhm,
not get exactly what you need as far as what's going to be best for your local government or your organization. So I think that piece of it is going to be really interesting of how they implement it and where in the government.
right,
Is it going
mhm,
to be in transportation? There's so much opportunities there, especially with, we don't all have a $500 billion budget over here,
that's right, mhm.
exactly how that's going to work. And we've seen that, and I'm not to like take over questioning, but I have this
No,
burning
please,
question for you is we've seen that kind of crash and burn a little bit in the European
mhm,
Union where they're, want to be AI centric kind of over in the UK, but they've had a really hard time with compliance, with
yep,
their governance around that, their policy around that, which is almost stalled innovation because everyone's like, I don't know what we're doing over here. What are we allowed to do? What are we not allowed to do? I'm not going to go invest in $100 million AI technology if I have no idea if I'm going to be able to keep it in a year. So,
mhm, yeah.
you obviously are kind of the expert around that policy and just overall that communication infrastructure. So I got to know, like, what do you think about that piece? Is that going to be possible? Is it going to be on the local level, state level? Just give us all the answers, Megan.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts around this because compliance is the biggest issue when it comes to AI. Because again, we're
Mhm.
talking about data and how that data is shared to teach the AI platform to
Exactly.
learn whatever you're trying to do it learns you over time, or your process over time. So how that data is shared is it's a little bit scary, and I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of noise in the market right now on how that data is shared. And we're talking about customer sensitive data, right?
Mhm.
You're dealing with the local government, so you can imagine what kind of data is with your local government, and you don't want your constituents' data all over the place. So, I think we do have to, start with the readiness, but within that readiness, we're going to have to look at our policies, and see how we can, one, protect our clients, and our local government and constituents. How do we protect them? But how do we manage this change to where we can utilize AI, right? To make our lives a little bit easier. And Clay
Mhm.
is in the comments. And Clay, please feel free to chime in here.
Mhm.
I'm no expert yet. I just know what I hear when I'm out and about talking to our potential prospects. But Clay says, when I tell my doctors I have analyzed my genome with AI, they are skeptical until I explain to them. Then they understand. It's so important to stay up to speed these days, and explaining how AI works is such an important skill
Mhm.
too. And it is. I don't disagree with you. I'm kind of in shock too, Keller, at how quickly AI has evolved, and how quickly, our customers are going to have to transition in looking at
Mhm.
their data and looking at their policies, because that is the biggest um, challenge, I think, in local government, is the policy changes, and how that data is shared across platforms. It's scary,
Oh,
actually.
yeah. It's terrifying. It is terrifying in the fact that it's so unknown, and we all know
Right.
that fear is birthed from the unknown, because just human nature is we're gonna tell ourselves a story, and, we're going to kind of pull back from the technology. That's why I think
Hmm.
it's so critical. I just did a video recently about the top growing jobs in 2025 from the LinkedIn
Hmm.
report. If you haven't read it, it's fascinating. But number one is an AI engineer. Number two is an AI consultant. Because it's one thing to be able to build the algorithm, right? Genius people,
Hmm.
absolutely brilliant. It's a whole nother thing to be able to kind of upskill the public, which is something that is just wild to me in the public sector. I always like am in awe of you guys that work with, the greater constituency, because it's
Hmm.
not just private consumers, right? It's not someone that's, just buying metals or just buying
Right.
e-commerce tools. It's the greater public. So they have
Hmm.
to kind of get up to speed, and you have to be so clear with them of what are we doing as far as
Hmm.
AI, and how are we making sure, that it's not, gonna hurt your children or anything like that, which is
Right.
one of, the most vulnerable pieces of society, is making sure that you gate off their access. And so that's one thing that in that readiness is so critical, because it analyzes your gaps. It
Right.
analyzes where your opportunities are, and that risk assessment to see, okay, not only how am I going to create a strategy to be more innovative, but how am I going to explain and address any
Yeah.
fears around AI in my greater community. And that's going to be, at least in my opinion, and of course, I'd love to hear yours, the biggest challenge. That's where the AI consultant comes in, because they are the communicator. Because many times we've seen these well intentioned city managers, these well intentioned CEOs go up on stage at a press conference and say, we are AI focused, we are smart city focused. And they think everyone's going to be so pumped about that.
Hmm.
But really, their constituents are terrified, and their entire staff is now going back to their desk to work on their resume, because they are like, I don't
Yeah.
know, am I going to be replaced? What's going to happen? Is robots going to be handing out, lunch lady food at the
Hmm.
schools? Like, what are we
Right.
doing? And if you don't effectively understand how that works, then, we don't have any opportunity to kind of fill in those gaps that just, again, constituents are going to fill themselves.
Yeah, I think organizations are going to have to define what being AI ready means to them, or AI focused, as you
Mhm.
said. right? What does that mean? Does that mean that we are coming in and we're going to take a look at what is possible for our organization? Or does that mean we've implemented Chat GPT across the board? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right. And we talk about this all the time in anything digital transformation. You mentioned smart city, right? I'm
Mhm.
getting excited because
Yeah.
what does smart city mean? What does that mean? Can anybody
I
tell me what that means? Because there there are a lot of different ideas out there, and I think, for our clients in particularly, they have to define what that means for their
Mhm.
organization, because what works in the city of Knoxville may not work in Monroe County, New York, right? They're 2 separate organizations that need, their needs vary. So I think just defining what being AI ready means is so important. And job security is a big piece of this. I think
Mhm.
employees that we work with on a daily basis, they're terrified that their jobs are going to be replaced. And the
Mhm.
reality of it is some jobs might be replaced. There are things that can be automated, and I hate to say that, but this is the world that we live in. And if we don't accept AI and accept what is coming, then we're going to get left behind, right?
Mhm.
But I think the biggest piece is really, Kyler, defining what that means to your organization, and then, as you said, come up with a communication plan, not just
Yeah.
internally but externally. And then also, there are things you can do as cities and counties, post forums and host town hall meetings to really engage with your citizens to reduce that fear. I think I put a video out a few weeks ago. I think step one is to actually let's start talking about AI,
Yeah.
because it's here, and it's here a lot quicker than I ever intended. So I think communication is a big piece, and being vulnerable, letting your citizens see what you're actually doing, but they can't see what you're doing until you have a plan, right? So that's what I think. I want to touch a little bit on funding, because we have seen recently that funds are being redirected from some grants, or some grants are not being funded. And I think what's happening is they're being redirected to this AI initiative. So,
Mhm.
what do you think that means? Not just, I mean, especially for local governments. What are your thoughts on that
Well, I
piece?
mean, funding, especially as a private sector expert, is
Yeah,
not at all like
it's
something that is a lot of times understood, especially when
right.
you have like things like SoftBank, which
Yep.
obviously is funding a lot of this. And I think the Trump administration is one of those administrations, love them or hate them. We're not here to talk about politics. We're just here to talk about technology. Is the fact that they do engage the private sector a lot more. So when it
Hmm.
comes to funding, that's where that policy has to come into place. And I totally agree with what you said, Megan, is each city and county is so much different than the other, not only from an infrastructure standpoint, but from a cultural standpoint. So when we have the federal government lead the way, yeah, that's super cool, right? Good for you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we need to be able to let fed or city governments, local
Hmm.
governments, county governments do what they need to do as well. And they need that ability to have that trickle down funding. And that's where it will get sticky, especially in, federal judges and things that they'll kind of shut down and move towards. That's why I hope that we can have kind of a niche focus on where are you going to activate this to kind of prove
Hmm.
to people that this is possible in conjunction. And of course, like just from like, not that we're TMZ over here, but with the Sam Altman Elon Musk feud,
Yeah.
Sam Altman obviously runs OpenAI, and that was created with in collaboration with Elon Musk to be a nonprofit Gen AI tool. And once it went for profit, because we all got obsessed with ChatGPT and they figured out, oh wow, make the world a better place for sure. But can we make billions and billions of dollars? Yes. So
Yeah.
that's when they kind of moved away from each other. And now you have this voice that is Elon Musk kind of waving the red flags, saying not AI everything. We need to understand kind of the back end of how these works. And I know Clay dropped in the comments the French chatbot, which was Lucy, in the French government.
Yeah.
And that chatbot was deployed with certain coding, just like all chatbots are. They can
Hmm.
answer frequently asked questions. But when it comes to the autonomous learning of a chatbot, that's not really always what they're there for, right? They're coded to ask frequently asked questions to make things more efficient as an AI agent. But then people started asking Lucy math problems, and she
Yeah.
couldn't solve these math problems. And it became this like running joke for the French people of like this chatbot that's supposed to handle all of this critical information about me and the government can't do 5 times 4. Right. So, those are the things that we need to educate our public around. This chatbot is a tool. It is not a living, breathing thing, right? I could, a human person on the phone for the DMV answer 4 times 5. I don't know. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not. It's the same with Lucy the chatbot, but that's going to be something that we need to have, not this kind of narrative around this is the silver bullet to being an efficient government. This is a tool to make our processes and the
Hmm.
constituents' experience more efficient. It is not the end all be all, right?
Right.
So I know I kind of like pivoted from the funding question,
No.
but each one of those need to really be focused on what is best for that city and county, with the federal government at least leading the way of, how are they going to make these mistakes, make these, type of things on a public stage. Hopefully we see more
Hmm.
successes than failures, but that can then trickle down to learnings for the local government, in
Right.
that way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just think there, like the beginning, there's still a lot of how this
Mhm,
is all going to play out. But I think the key message here is that we all need to get ready for it, whatever that means for you,
mhm,
defining how you're going to utilize it in your own organizations and asking good questions, right?
mhm,
And starting that conversation. I'm going to go
mhm.
to the comments really quick, Kyler, if
Yeah,
you don't
yeah,
mind.
of course.
So Malka, who is a project manager for Vero. Hey, Malka, thank you for joining today. She says, with the Stargate project expected to create over 100,000 jobs while also potentially automating others, what strategies should local governments adopt to reskill and transition workers whose roles may be displaced by AI? This
Mhm,
is a great question, and this is
mhm,
a topic I wanted to hit on anyway.
mhm.
So, Kyler, do you want to start out and then I'll add my thoughts?
For sure, absolutely, and definitely want to hear your thoughts because really, Megan is the
Yeah.
expert in this. But when it comes to reskilling, or upskilling, whatever you want to call it, this is a big piece that I'm super passionate about because I think a lot of times, especially when we look at maybe more tenured or experienced employees, we kind of count them out of the AI game when really they are
Hmm.
an incredibly valuable tool to making sure, because they have the experience, they know the culture, to making sure that technology is implemented correctly. So I think the
Hmm.
first thing I always recommend is engage them in focus groups. Tell them about
Hmm.
the new technology, tell them about what's happening, get their feedback around it, and then be able to integrate that feedback, both quantitative and qualitative. Again, you should be doing organizational readiness assessments
Yep.
too. It's not just about talking about in focus groups. I can't tell you the amount of times I've sat presenting readiness assessment data to the executive team, and we're like, well, the finance department voted that they don't feel like this is going to be successful. And they are shocked because they think they know the culture of the organization, but 9 times out of 10, they are just removed from that because they have that executive bubble. Nobody's coming
Hmm.
to them a lot of times saying, I hate my job. This place is terrible and toxic. So you need to really get into that data. And when it comes to reskilling and upskilling, I think you can also use technology to do that in a bite sized fashion. So, having an on demand opportunity to do short form videos so it can be as self guided as it needs to be for more faster paced, technology savvy individuals. but then also have that document repository or that video library for them to access at any time. So using something like
Hmm.
a learning management system or an
Yep.
idea in which you can access this on demand, so that when you're going through something, you're like, I don't know how to do that. That's how that starts. But you have to do it in a way that they're comfortable with. And that's going to depend on your organizational readiness data. And the one last thing I'll throw in before we get your thoughts, Megan, get someone that has done this before, whether it's a consultant, whether it's
Right.
an internal employee that you bring on. This is a very niche area, and there's some people in the industry that are so good at it. So find them, call them, at least talk to them and say, like, hey, how would you do this? It is going to be so much more efficient and so much cleaner, because the minute you fail on this, you lose trust with your entire organization. And then you're just
That's right.
climbing that hill to get back up to, resetting expectations. And that is a really dangerous place to be.
It is. I go back very simply to
Hmm.
strategy, 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 strategy. You can't be a city manager or a mayor or an executive leader and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Good luck. Right? I love your idea of focus groups. These employees need to know how AI is going to affect their job, how it's going to, make it easier, make it more streamlined. And AI itself is not going to replace
Hmm.
jobs. People who know how to use AI
Hmm.
will, right? Because at the end of the day, the AI still has to be managed, right? I mean, we use AI for some internal processes here, and I'm still having to
Yeah,
babysit it a little bit, right? And so I think communication, it's the key to change management.
absolutely.
There's a lot of change that is going to happen, and this is with any digital
Hmm.
transformation project, right? But with AI, I think your employees need to know how it's going to affect their
Hmm.
job, and before they know that, you've got to have a plan and a strategy for how you plan to use it. So I agree. Call us, watch our YouTube channel all the time, but our clients, they have day jobs too, Kyler, and it's
Hmm.
it's very hard for them to step away
Okay.
and to really see things from a holistic view. And so I think that's what we are really good at, is saying, hey, this is where you're at today, and if you want to go here, here are the 10 steps that you need to do to get there, right? So I go back to strategy, Malka. I mean, I know you're asking what strategies. I mean, I think communication is one, but having a plan for how, it's going to replace a process, and making sure that whoever owned that process before understands how it affects, why it's important for them to adapt this new technology, right? So that they don't get left behind. And that's a huge part of change management is communication. I go back to, you I think it was last year, when my boss sat down with me and said, hey, here's this new tool, chat gpt, right? And maybe I have my dates wrong, but I feel like it was just last year, and I was like, what is this chat gpt? And so it took me a while, how to use it. I didn't want it to speak for me, but I needed to research some things. And anyway, so it took about 2 weeks for me to really learn how I could best use chat gpt in my job
Hmm.
role, right? And building out some of the things in it. But he didn't just say, here's chat gpt, right? We had
Hmm.
some learning sessions and some training around that. So I don't know. Did I answer the question? I feel like I'm talking in circles, but that's how I feel about it. I really feel for these government employees who are just
Hmm.
working their tails off to make sure that their citizens are served in the best way possible, and they're overwhelmed and they have day jobs. And I hate it when executive leadership is just like,
Yeah.
here's this new technology, good luck, figure it out. That's when people, they
No.
have no buy-in to what you're trying to
Yeah.
do. So that's how I feel about it. Clay had some good comments. Said, Malka, the old AI won't take your job. Someone who knows
Yeah.
how to use AI will, and I stick behind that comment. Um, Wow, we've almost been talking for 40 minutes. This is great, Kyler. Back to
Yeah.
Stargate. One of the other questions that I had just when I was doing
Mhm.
my research is, what
Yeah.
if it fails? Like, what if? And I'm really good at asking those questions, but what if it fails?
Yeah.
What do you
Well,
think?
I mean, I think it totally depends, and I always am like, "Don't say it depends on these things." But when it comes to failure, we would have to first know what we're trying to get to, and then I think that's why
True.
failures in our industry are such clickbait headlines, because maybe it was a failure to you, but not a failure to the organization. It depends on what the goals are, right? So I think the biggest thing that they're going to need to be doing is be clear about what the expectations are. And, as we kind of talked about Lucy, the expectations were wrong around
Hmm.
that. So when they implement these, even in if they're say they're using an AI agent or an autonomous system, they need to be able to say something like, "Hi, I'm Lucy. I know a certain amount of things, but some other things I don't know, but I can point you in the right direction," type of thing like that. So on a micro
Hmm.
level, that is, example of how they need to effectively communicate what is the overall goal of this program. And with the use of the private sector, that's where we get things like a lack of transparency. And we really have to be dedicated
Hmm.
to making sure that we're providing updates on this and being able to showcase those micro wins, which we know are so important. We might not have done all of these different things quite yet, but we've already created over 100,000 jobs in Abilene, Texas to showcase that. That's a huge win. So being able to continue to
Hmm.
communicate that, I think is going to kind of create trust so that when something does go kind of funky or wrong, then the public is going to be like, you know what? They've been honest with us this whole time. They've created this amount of jobs. And
Yeah.
yeah, nothing is ever going to go perfectly. Who cares type of thing, as opposed to people just like waiting, on a hair trigger for something to go wrong because robots are going to be chasing us, red-eyed robots down the street, and we're going to have that
That's right.
Terminator effect mentality. So I think that is the one reason, because we know with any technology implementation project, 100% of them, something fails, right? That is the point of
Something fails.
testing.
Yep.
That's why when someone tries to shorten their
Hmm.
testing timeline, we all lose our minds, because that is the only thing that matters is those testing scenarios. Another thing you can utilize AI for when we're looking at AI in implementation. But I think that is going to be the critical piece, is making sure that they're communicating those micro wins. So they're showing these showcase of the program and just overall growth, like we recommend for
Hmm.
organizations, as opposed to just one
Hmm.
failure point. Because we know, the media climate here in the United States, they love a good story. So the minute they're able to say, "Oh, this was
Yeah.
a huge failure," they're going to say it as loud as they possibly can, even though we know all technology projects have some failure point in there. So I think the next step for them is to really showcase the wins and how they're utilizing this, give examples, and continue to be transparent with the public of this is where we're
Yeah.
implementing it and this is what we're trying, as opposed to keeping kind of this veil of secrecy around it. And then people want it to fail because they're like, this is weird. I don't know what this
Right.
is. And then they want it to go away. So that's really like the industrial psychology behind making sure that you're able to
Hmm.
define failure on your terms, as opposed to on, somebody else's terms that's not in your circle of influence.
That's right. No, I love those thoughts, and that's great. And transparency is so key, like you said, in any digital
Mhm.
transformation project. With our clients, every time we hit a milestone, we
Mhm.
do a presentation, right? On, hey, these are the things that we did. Here are your deliverables, and this is what that means for the next step going forward. And I've actually seen, Kyler, some requests for proposals that
Mhm.
request that, and I think that's great, because it allows you uh, to show transparency not only with your consultant but for your employees, and then also your citizens. You have something to show them, right, when they come to you asking questions as to where their tax
Mhm.
dollars are being spent. So I love that transparency. As we wrap up today, um, key takeaways and maybe some advice that you would give our viewers in terms of AI. I feel
Yeah.
like we've pounded it in on strategy, but anything else, any other advice that you would give our viewers today in terms of, you know,
Yeah.
Stargate, how big of an initiative it is, how they can prepare, how they can, you know, decipher through all of the noise that it's bringing to the
Well, I think,
marketplace.
I think following key influencers like Megan and Avero for that
Oh,
content
thank
to
you.
be able to see what is actually happening, not from, a media outlet or anything like that, but in the industry, joining that conversation. And I always say, especially to our, our younger employees, join that conversation. It's fine to be wrong. Being able to comment something about
Yes.
Stargate and someone then correcting you. That's the point of doing that, is to be able to
Yes.
learn from the people that are the experts in AI, that understand what it needs to be implemented into an organization and those requirements. So I always like, when our industry is on the forefront of innovation and talking about that, even when we know that, especially in the public sector, we might not be there as far as readiness, but still talking about that is going to normalize the conversation and kind of take away that veil of fear, allow people to kind of own that vulnerability and say, I don't know what AI means for our organization. And then you'll soon learn that no one does, unless you have a roadmap
Right.
that you made with a collaboration with an AI expert. So I always recommend utilizing LinkedIn as a tool, making sure that you're asking those questions, following those influencers, engaging in that conversation, because they're going to be the ones that really understand like the nuts and bolts of the implementation. The other thing I always recommend is get those AI certs. Go out into get your Google AI cert, get your
Yeah.
data cert, especially if you're in our consultants community and you're like, okay, I'm an ERP consultant. I don't know what I'm going to do next. My specialty is SAP. It's not a lot happening, with AI and SAP, which there is. Relax, SAP. I know that there's something happening with AI, but when it comes to being able to full service your clients, you're going to want to know what those applications are. So go out and get those data certs as
Hmm.
well, making sure that you understand how data can be utilized with AI to kind of fast track that implementation. And then I would say for the city managers, the IT directors out there, for local governments, is be okay, get real comfy with the word I don't know. Okay. It's in a lot of times we
That's
have
right.
this weird thing, especially in the public sector, where like I don't know isn't an acceptable answer. Well, right now, you don't know how that's going to work, but I have concept A, B, and C in place with my AI coaches or AI consultants that we're going to be testing in, C, D, and E type of thing. So it's fine to not know what you're doing right now. It's about accessing your resources to be able to do that. And I can't say this enough. It's not your vendor. So don't go ask your vendor about AI. You can certainly ask them and see what they
Hmm.
say, but that's not they're not going to be on the forefront of that answer because it's expensive for them to do R&D around AI as opposed to acquiring another smaller AI firm. So those would probably be my top three pieces of where to get your research, how to grow in the industry, and then also how to talk about it if you're, not sure what's going on. So definitely want to
Yeah, no, those are all great. And say it louder for those in the back. Do not try to get your information from a software vendor. I
oh,
love you
sure.
guys. I
Yeah.
love you guys. But like Kyler said, it is very expensive for them to go out and do that. But also, you know, they don't. there's no like revolution in any ERP software that that AI has worked in. So anyway, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah,
Maybe that's a topic
yeah.
for another live stream. What not to
Huh.
ask your vendors. But I couldn't agree more with that. So with that being said, guys, we're here for you. We want to help you break through the noise of all that's going on in the market. There's a lot of information out there, and so our job is really to be that trusted advisor and help you decipher through all of that noise. So make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms. Make sure you download our 2025 report, and make sure you just
Mhm.
reach out to us. And as Kyler mentioned, join in on the conversation, please. We want to hear from you, and we want to hear your thoughts and your opinions, and let us know when we're wrong. Right, that's how we get better. So Kyler, thank you so much for
Yeah.
going live with me today. I really enjoyed hearing your thoughts and your expertise. Again, thank you for all that you've done for me and for Vero as a whole, and we
It's my
appreciate you being
pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to the audience
on.
for your great questions. I'll definitely go back in there and engage in the comments, as Megan said. So
Yeah. So, with that being said, you'll see us next Wednesday. I think me and Boss Man are going to go live. So, he hasn't been, well, he was on last week, but I feel like he's been missing in action for a while. So, we're happy to get back on, get him back on live stream. So, make sure you tune in next Wednesday at 10 a.m. and we'll see you guys
thank you.
soon.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.